poor rancher offered water to Apache warriors that the town called enemies, and everything changed. The rope screamed against the old pulley as Owen Rourke pulled another bucket from the well. Each creak echoed like breath drawn through a scar. Heat shimmered above the white sands of Tularosa Basin, blinding, endless. When the bucket surfaced, he froze. 5 figures were crossing the glare, 3 men, 2 women, all Apache. Dust and blood clung to them like ash to dying coals. The one in front, a woman with a bandaged shoulder, moved as if pain were just another step. Her eyes black, unwavering, met his. They stopped at the fence, parched lips cracking. The younger warrior gripped his knife, ready to take. But before he moved, Owen stepped forward, set the bucket between them, and backed away. The woman lifted it, drank slowly, never looking down. Then in halting English, she asked, why? Owen's voice rasped, because you're thirsty. The land around Red Hollow Ranch was all bone and memory. Wind swept through mesquite and ghost grass, whispering the same story it had told for centuries, how the sun burned everything it touched. Even the air carried a weight of salt and rust, tasting like the bottom of a dried-up riverbed. Owen Rourke had lived alone there for 3 years. Once, the ranch had been full of sound, his daughter's laughter, his wife's humming while tending the fire. Now, only the wind answered him. The barn leaned like a tired old man, the corrals long empty, yet the well still gave water, clear and cold, as if the earth pitied him enough to let him keep one mercy. He moved like someone made of dust and habit, pulling rope, fixing hinges, mending fences for a herd long gone. His face bore the calm of a man who had stopped expecting miracles. Beneath his left eye, a faint scar caught the sunlight, a memory of the night everything ended. People said it was the Apache who raided his ranch. Owen never confirmed it. He just stopped talking. Now, in the shimmer of that cruel summer, he found himself staring at strangers who looked more like shadows than people. The woman who led them stood tall despite her wound. Her dark hair, braided and half undone, brushed the blood-soaked bandage on her shoulder beneath the sweat and dust. Her skin had the copper glow of sun-forged resilience. Her gaze didn't plead, it judged. Behind her, the other staggered, a grizzled elder whose eyes carried too many winters, a youth with fury tight in his jaw. Another woman half carrying a wounded man. They were all exhausted, but pride kept them upright. When the last drop in the bucket vanished, Owen noticed how the woman's hand trembled before she steadied it on the wooden rim. She wiped her mouth with the back of her wrist and returned the bucket without a word. The silence that followed was thicker than the heat. Flies buzzed. Somewhere, a hawk cried over the ridge. Owen cleared his throat. You can rest by the shed. The shade's better there. The young warrior bristled, his hand still near his knife. But the woman Talina, the elder murmured her name, gave a slight nod. She turned to Owen once more, her voice low, roughened by thirst and pride. You, not hate us. Owen looked past her, to the horizon where the sand met the sky. Hate's dry work, he said. I've had enough of dry. Talina studied him, unreadable. Then, for the first time, her expression softened just a fraction. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of mesquite smoke. It smelled like something waiting to begin. By late afternoon, the heat had turned the sky to brass. The air above Red Hollow shimmered, folding the world into a wavering mirage. Owen had given the Apache group, the old horse shed, 3 walls, 1 broken roof beam, and enough shade to keep them from burning alive. He brought them a canteen and a loaf of hard bread, then stayed by the doorway, his shadow long on the ground. Talina accepted the food without a word. The younger man, Nakoa, shot Owen a glare sharp enough to cut rope. He muttered something in Apache, but Talina silenced him with a quiet look. "You can stay till night," Owen said. "After that, I'd move east. The basin gets colder than you'd think." No one answered. The elder, Tona Kahana, sat near the wounded man, murmuring prayers in their tongue. Dust clung to every breath. Owen turned to leave, but then hooves. The sound rolled through the dry air like thunder over tin. He looked up toward the ridge. 6 riders came into view, sunlight flashing off their rifles. The man leading them wore a wide hat and a grin carved by arrogance. "Silas Boone," Rourke Boone called out, voice booming. "Looks like you've got company." Owen stepped forward, jaw tightening. "What brings you here?" Boone's men spread out, eyes fixed on the shed. "Heard there were hostiles in the basin. Must be the same ones that burned Morrison's place to the ground. Thought we'd handle it before they slither off." "They're half dead," Owen said. "Just need water." Boone spat. "Water for devils." He dismounted, boots crushing the sand. "You forgot what they did to Miriam and little June." The name struck like a knife turned in an old wound. Owen's hand twitched toward his belt. But there was no gun there. He hadn't carried one in years. Boone smiled, sensing the weakness. "I'd say you owe them more than kindness." Behind Owen, Nakoa tensed, gripping his knife. Talina moved between him and Boone, eyes locked on the man's rifle. She didn't speak, but her stance said everything she'd seen this kind of hatred before. Owen's voice came rough and low. "They didn't do it." Boone laughed, loud and empty. "You taking their word for it now?" "No," Owen said, stepping closer. "I'm taking mine." The 2 men stood so near that dust from Boone's breath touched Owen's shirt. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The horses pawed at the ground, uneasy. Finally, Boone spat into the dirt between them. "You've chosen your side." "Rourke," he turned to his men. "Let's go. The vultures will finish what he started." When they rode off, the wind filled the silence again, humming through the mesquite. Owen let out a slow breath and looked toward the shed. Talina stood at its edge, watching him. "Why you stand against your own?" she asked quietly. He wiped sweat from his brow. "Because I'm tired of being someone's weapon." That night, the desert cooled. Crickets returned, cautious. Owen sat by the well, the rope swaying gently in the breeze from the shed. He saw Talina step out, her wound wrapped tighter now. She moved like a shadow in moonlight. "You're not afraid I'll kill you?" she asked, her voice nearly a whisper. Owen didn't look up. "I already died once." She studied him for a long moment, as if trying to read the shape of that sentence. Then she sat across from him, back to the well. The moon hung over them like a pale coin dropped by a careless god. Neither spoke again, but for the first time in years, Owen didn't feel completely alone. Morning came pale and windless. The basin lay still, as if holding its breath after the night's uneasy truce. Owen woke before sunrise. Out of habit more than need, he filled a bucket, walked toward the shed, and stopped short when he saw Talina already there, kneeling beside the wounded man, pressing a strip of cloth soaked in cool water to his brow. Her movements were steady, despite her own wound, in the gray light. She seemed carved from something older than flesh, as if the desert itself had decided to take a woman's form. "You'll drain my well at that rate," Owen said, his tone dry but not unkind. Talina looked up, a flicker of amusement softening her face. "Then you build new one." He almost smiled. "Wish it were that easy." The older warrior, Ton Kahana, nodded in quiet thanks. Nakoa, still wary, kept his distance, sharpening a blade on a rock. Owen knelt beside the injured man, whose breathing was shallow but steady. He motioned toward Talina's shoulder. "You let me change that bandage." Her eyes narrowed, uncertain. "Or you can let it fester," he added. "Your choice." For a moment, pride won out. Then she sighed and turned her back. He tore a strip from a clean shirt, dipped it in water, and began to unwind the blood-stained wrap. The wound beneath was deep but healing. His fingers brushed her skin warm, sun-scarred, trembling only slightly. "You were soldier?" she asked suddenly. He paused. "Once? You fight Apache?" "Yes." She turned her head just enough for him to see her eyes. "And now you give us water." He tied the bandage gently, pulling it snug. "People can change." Talina said nothing more, but when he stepped away, she met his gaze fully, no anger, no suspicion. Only a silent question he couldn't yet answer. By mid-morning, the air shimmered again. Owen led one of his horses toward the corral, hoping to find a reason to keep busy. Talina followed him out, slower, her arms still in a sling. She watched how he checked the animal's hooves, how his hand moved calm and certain along its flank. "You talked a horse," she said. "Someone's got to," he replied. "Beats arguing with the wind." Her lips curved just slightly. "Wind always wins." Owen glanced at her, caught by the faint humor hiding beneath her weariness. It struck him how human that moment felt, two people, stripped of tribe and side, sharing the smallest piece of peace. As the sun climbed, the others rested inside the shed. Talina stayed near the well, coiling and uncoiling the rope absently. Owen handed her a tin cup of water. "Your name means something, doesn't it?" he asked. She nodded. "It means hill under the sun. My father say I was born where land meets sky." He considered that. Sounds like a hard place to leave. Her gaze drifted toward the horizon. Everything worth keeping is hard to leave. Silence followed, comfortable this time. A hawk circled above, its cry slicing through the stillness. Owen leaned against the post. "You had a family." She hesitated. "I had a child, girl, died last winter." She touched the leather cord around her wrist, threaded with small beads. "She made this, said it would keep me safe." Owen's throat tightened. "It's beautiful." "She was," Talina whispered. The words hung in the air between them, two broken lives, mirrored in different tongues. By afternoon, the desert heat began to wane. Shadows lengthened across the sand, and the first breath of cooler wind slid down from the hills. Owen brought out what little food he had left: beans, dry biscuits, and a jar of honey he'd been saving since spring. He set them out wordlessly. Talina blinked, surprised. "You share all?" He shrugged. "You can't eat pride." For the first time, she laughed, a soft, unsteady sound, half disbelief, half relief. The kind of laugh that had forgotten itself for too long. That night, when the stars came out, Owen sat by the well again. Talina joined him, her hair loose, catching the moonlight. They said nothing, but when the rope creaked and the bucket touched the water below, both of them listened to the echo rising from the deep, the sound of something that had survived fire, drought, and silence. For the first time in years, the night at Red Hollow didn't feel empty. The next morning dawned pale and heavy. A sky of pewter stretched above the basin. Owen knew before he stepped outside that something had changed. The air carried a strange stillness, a pause before storm or gunfire. He found Talina by the fence, tightening the leather strap of her sling. Her movements were slower now, deliberate, as if she too felt the weight pressing down. "You hear that?" he asked. She tilted her head. The wind had stopped. In the distance, faint and uncertain, came the echo of hooves, not one horse many. Before Owen could speak again, movement appeared along the dry ridge. A small figure stumbled forward, sunburned and ragged, skirts torn to ribbons. The girl collapsed halfway down the slope, her cry lost in the dust. Owen ran first. Talina followed, instinct pulling her even as Nakoa shouted for her to stay back. When they reached the girl, she was shaking so hard that her teeth chattered despite the heat. "Please," she whispered, eyes rolling white with terror. "Don't let them find me." Owen lifted her gently. Her pulse fluttered weakly beneath dirt and bruises. She couldn't have been more than 17. They carried her to the shade of the shed. Talina poured water into her cupped hands, coaxing the girl to drink. "My name's Owen," he said softly. "You're safe here." The girl blinked at him, then flinched when she saw Talina's dark braids and copper skin. "Apache," she gasped, scrambling backward. "It's all right," Owen said quickly, steadying her shoulders. "She's not your enemy." Talina stayed still, hands open, voice calm. "No harm. You rest." The girl's breathing steadied, though fear still clung to her. I'm Amelia, from Morrison Ranch." Owen stiffened. "There's no Morrison Ranch anymore." Amelia's eyes filled. "They came at dawn, men dressed like Apache, but I heard them talk white men, some drunk. One of them said Boone would pay double for every house burned." The words hit like a hammer. Owen's mind reeled. Boone. Again. Boone, who'd stirred the towns against the tribes, who'd shouted for vengeance while buying up the scorched land for pennies. Boone, whose riders had come the same night his family died. He looked at Talina. She had gone still, her face unreadable, but her hands clenched around the rim of the water bucket until her knuckles whitened. "My people, they not do this," she said, voice low. "He use our name." Owen nodded slowly. "He used mine too." From the corner, Tone Kahana spoke, his tone heavy with warning. "Others follow her trail." My eyes saw sign on ridge warriors of Black Mesa. "They see her here, see us with white man. They kill all." Nakoa cursed under his breath. "Then we leave." Owen shook his head. "You won't make it 5 miles before Boone's riders find you. He'll be back with soldiers this time." Talina's eyes darted toward the horizon, calculating, desperate. "Then we fight." Owen hesitated, then looked toward the well. "No, we show them the truth." Tone frowned. "Truth don't stop bullets." "No," Owen agreed. "But maybe it'll stop more from being fired." He explained quickly the old Apache signal fires, used to call parley between tribes. 3 columns, then 2, then 1 we come to speak, not to kill. Talina's eyes narrowed. "You know our signs, I learned them when I was still a soldier," Owen said. "We ignored them then. Maybe it's time someone didn't." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Talina gave a single nod. "We try." Together they built the platform beside the well-dry wood from the collapsed barn, fresh branches soaked to make thick smoke. Owen worked with the quiet focus of a man building his own redemption. By late afternoon, the first plume rose into the sky, white smoke curling upward like a prayer. Then the second, then the third. The air smelled of sage and fire. Not long after, movement shimmered on the northern rim, a line of riders, Apache warriors, painted and armed, moving slow and steady toward the signal. From the west came the opposite sight, Boone and nearly 24 riders, kicking up red dust as they approached. Owen stood between the 2 horizons, the fire crackling behind him. The heat of the flames bit at his back, the weight of choice pressed on his chest. Boone arrived first, grinning like a man certain of victory. "You've outdone yourself this time, Rourke, signaling for help from your savage friends." Owen's face didn't change. "They're coming to talk." Boone laughed. "Talk to the people who butchered your family." Before Owen could reply, the Apache riders reached the clearing, their chief. A tall elder, with gray braids and a carved staff, halted at the edge of the smoke. His gaze swept across the scene, the white men with rifles, the wounded in the shed, and the fire between them. For a heartbeat, the desert itself seemed to listen. Then Amelia stepped forward. Her voice trembled, but it carried. "They didn't burn Morrison Ranch. I saw the men who did. They worked for him." She pointed at Boone. Boone's grin faltered. "Girl's delirious," he barked. "She's been through hell. Hell you made." Owen cut in. Boone's hand shot to his revolver. "You think anyone will believe a half-dead ranch hand and a pack of savages?" The world narrowed to that moment, the glint of metal, the hiss of smoke, the sound of Talina shouting something in Apache, then the gun fired. A blur moved faster than the bullet's echo. Tone Kahana, the elder, lunged forward, pushing Amelia aside. The shot caught him square in the chest. The smoke from the fires curled upward, mingling with the gun's gray breath. For a heartbeat, time froze. Then Tone fell to his knees. Talina caught him before he hit the ground. "No," she whispered, voice breaking in a tongue older than the land itself. "You can't leave yet." Tone's blood spread dark against the sand. He looked at Owen, then at Talina. Truth, worth dying for. He rasped and went still. The silence that followed was unbearable. Even Boone's men hesitated, shaken by the sight of the old warrior dying in peace. Owen knelt, closing Tone's eyes. Then he rose, turning to Boone. "No more lies," he said. Voice like gravel, something inside Boone cracked. "You're all mad," he snarled, raising his gun again. But before he could fire, one of his own men, Caleb, the youngest, shouted, "He's the liar. He paid us to burn those farms." Boone spun, wild-eyed. "Shut up, boy!" The Apache chief raised his hand. Dozens of arrows drew back, taut as held breath. Owen stepped between them all. "Enough," he roared. "No one else dies for this man's greed." The chief lowered his arms slowly. Boone stood trembling, surrounded by the people he'd hunted and betrayed. Talina laid Tone's body down beside the well. Her voice, hoarse and hollow, carried in both languages. "He died for truth. Let us not waste it." The desert held its breath once more, waiting to see which world would begin when the next wind blew. For a long time after the gunfire faded, no one moved. The wind finally returned to the basin, soft and low, carrying the scent of blood, sage, and burnt wood. Smoke from the signal fires curled upward in tired spirals, dissolving into the endless sky. Boone stood frozen where he'd dropped his gun, eyes darting between the Apache and his own men. The arrogance had drained from him, leaving only sweat and fear. Caleb, the youngest rider, was the first to break the silence. He dismounted, threw his rifle into the dust, and said in a shaky voice, "I'm done with this." The others looked at each other, then followed, one by one. Rifles hit the ground. The sound of metal on sand was the only answer Boone received. Owen stepped closer. "You built this war out of lies. Boone, you used their faces to hide your own crimes." Boone's lips curled into something like a snarl. "You think you're better than me? You gave them water. Rourke, you opened your gate to the same kind of people who killed your wife." Owen's jaw tightened, but his voice was steady. "Maybe they didn't kill her. Maybe you did." Boone lunged, then more out of madness than courage. He barely made 2 steps before the Apache chief gestured, and a rope whip cracked through the air. Boone fell face first into the dust, wrists bound before he could rise. His hat rolled away into the sagebrush, spinning until it lay still. No one cheered. There was no victory here, only the quiet collapse of something that had poisoned the land too long. Talina knelt beside Tone's body. Her fingers trembled as she arranged the old man's blanket, smoothing the creases, whispering in her language words meant to guide a spirit home. Owen came to her side but said nothing. He knew the sound of mourning. He'd lived inside it. When she finished, she reached to her wrist and untied the leather cord her daughter had made. The beads gleamed faintly blue, white, and amber, colors of sky, cloud, and earth. She placed it in Owen's palm, closing his hand around it. "He died between our worlds," she said softly. "Let him rest where they meet." Owen's throat burned. "He'll rest by the well." The ground soft there. Together, they carried Tone's body toward the back of the ranch, where a dry creek cut through the land. The Apache chief followed, chanting low. Even Boone's captured men hung back in silence, hats in their hands. At the edge of the creek, Owen took a shovel. The sound of metal striking earth echoed in steady rhythm, thud, scrape, thud, until a small grave took shape beneath the mesquite. Talina knelt beside it, placing a sprig of sage on the bottom before they lowered the body down. When it was done, the chief spoke in slow, accented English. "Today, death come for one man only. That is enough." He turned to Owen. "Your water saved lives. That is power greater than rifle." Owen looked at his blistered hands. "It doesn't feel like power. Then it is the right kind," the chief replied. He gave a short nod to Talina, then to Owen, and signaled his warriors. They gathered their wounded, mounted their horses, and rode north, their silhouettes shrinking into the copper haze until they vanished. Only the echo of hooves lingered, a heartbeat fading into the desert's vast silence. Amelia stood near the well, her face streaked with dust and tears. She was the first to speak when the quiet grew unbearable. "They'll talk about this, won't they? About what really happened?" Owen wiped his brow, glancing toward the fading trails of smoke. "They'll talk," he said, "but maybe not all of them will listen." Talina joined them, her steps slow but steady. "Truth takes long road," she said, "but it walk." Amelia met her eyes, timid but sincere. "I'm sorry for what they said about your people." Talina's lips curved faintly. "And I'm sorry for what mine said about yours." They clasped hands briefly, 2 worlds touching, fragile but real. Boone was tied to a fence post by then, eyes hollow, mouth twisting as he muttered curses to no one in particular. The sun had begun to dip, staining the sky with rust and violet. His shadow stretched long and thin, like the last lie of a dying man. Owen didn't look at him again. Some ghosts weren't worth the trouble of hatred. Instead, he turned back to the well. The rope creaked as he pulled up a bucket. The water shimmered silver in the fading light. He poured a little onto his hands, then splashed the rest over the grave. "For the thirsty," he murmured. Talina stood beside him, the wind lifting strands of her hair. Her voice was soft, almost carried away by the breeze. "You give water to enemies, and now you give to the dead what you have left for yourself." Owen smiled faintly, maybe enough to start again. For the first time, her expression eased, no defiance, no guarded watchfulness, only tired eyes that had seen too much loss, and, perhaps, something worth trusting again. The 3 of them, Owen, Talina, and Amelia, stood together in the twilight, the basin stretching endless around them. The smoke had thinned to a pale ribbon against the reddening sky. When the first star blinked to life above the horizon, Owen spoke quietly, as if to himself. The land's still here. Maybe that means we're meant to stay. 2. Talina looked toward the grave, then the well. Water, remember, she said. It keeps what it touches. He turned to her. Then let it remember this day. Her eyes met his, steady and dark. And in that shared silence, something shifted small, tentative, but alive. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even peace. But it was the beginning of both. The night came softly, carrying the scent of sage and wet earth. A coyote called from far off, the sound rising and falling like a prayer unanswered, but still spoken. Owen sat by the well until the stars grew thick overhead. Talina lingered beside him, her fingers brushing the rim of the bucket as if listening for the echo of water below. In the distance, Amelia lit a lantern inside the shed. Its glow reached them faintly, a fragile promise against the dark. For the first time in years, Owen felt the pull of something other than grief, a quiet urge to build, to stay, to keep the water running for whoever might come next. He looked at Talina and said, "Tomorrow, we'll mend the fence." She gave a small nod. Yes, tomorrow. And together they sat, silent but no longer alone, while the basin breathed again around them, its wind softer now, its heart still beating beneath the sand. The dawn that followed was the gentlest the basin had seen in years. Clouds drifted thin and pale across a sky washed clean by the night wind. The desert, usually sharp-edged and cruel, looked softened, almost tender beneath the first light. Owen rose before the others. He crossed to the well, listening to the quiet creak of the rope, the whisper of water far below. The bucket rose, smooth and steady, and when he tipped it over the trough, the splash rang like the sound of a bell clear, forgiving. Behind him, Talina approached barefoot, her hair unbraided, loose as the morning breeze. She carried a small bundle wrapped in cloth. "Sage," she said simply, "for him." They walked together to the grave behind the ranch. The earth was still dark and soft from last night's water. Talina knelt and pressed the sage down, her hand lingering over the soil. He wanted peace. She murmured. Owen crouched beside her. "He found it," he said. "So did we. Maybe." Talina turned her head slightly, eyes tracing the horizon where the white sands met the sky. "Peace is like wind," she said. "You don't hold it, you stand in it." They stayed there until the sun cleared the ridge, painting the land in shades of gold and copper. The old barn cast a long shadow across the yard. The well shone bright, its stones glistening with dew. Amelia joined them quietly. Holding a cup of water drawn from the well, she poured a few drops over the grave and whispered, "For the ones who couldn't stay." No one spoke after that. There was nothing left to explain. By midday, the Apache chief returned with 2 of his men to collect Boone. The outlaw's eyes were empty now, his body sagging as they bound him to his horse. He said nothing, only stared once at Owen, perhaps realizing too late that a single act of kindness had undone his empire of hate. When they were gone, the basin fell silent again. Only the wind remained and the steady hum of the well's rope swinging gently in its cradle. Owen leaned on the fence rail, watching Talina move through the yard. She worked quietly, repairing a broken gate, her movements slow but certain. For the first time, she seemed to belong not as a guest, not as a trespasser, but as someone meant to stand there. Amelia was by the porch, brushing the dust from a saddle blanket. Her laughter soft, uncertain, but real, rose into the warm air. The sound made something inside Owen unclench. A muscle he hadn't known was still waiting to heal. He turned to Talina. "When the well's full, the land starts to bloom again," he said. She glanced up, wiping sweat from her brow. "Maybe it not just land," she answered. Their eyes met. No promises, no grand words, only the quiet truth of two lives no longer defined by loss. As the sun sank low, they stood together by the well. The water below caught the last light, turning the surface to molten gold. Dust hung in the air like mist, glowing softly around them. Amelia's voice drifted from the porch. "People will tell this story, won't they? About how the fighting stopped here?" Talina looked toward the horizon, where the last smoke from the night's fire still lingered faintly. "They'll say war ended," she said, "but war only changes shape." Owen nodded. "Then let them also say that water still runs at Red Hollow." The three of them stood silent, watching the sun slip behind the ridges. The desert wind rose again, carrying the smell of sage and the faint rustle of life returning. When the final light touched the well, its reflection shimmered across their faces, three survivors bound not by blood, but by mercy. And when the night came, the basin did not sleep. It breathed. It remembered. And the well kept singing a quiet, endless hymn for all who had once been thirsty.